Chapter 30. Cohen. Virginia pulled her hand away and took a step back. Narumel. Ah, yes, said Narumel. I see that you have heard of me. Virginia took another step back. You could say that. Narumel reached out his hand. Come, Virginia. Dine with me this evening, and I'm sure you will find that I'm more of a gentleman than the people of this city give me credit for. Will I now? Narumel smiled. Please, Virginia, let's be civil, let's be real with each other. Virginia looked around at all the haunting eyes leering at her from the crowd. I tell you what, said Narumel, if you dine with me this evening and listen to my proposal, I can assure you upon my word that I will return you to the city. She looked at him out of the corner of her eye carefully. But if you do not, he continued, then I will not order my ships to cease firing upon the city. She looked over the sea at the fleet of ships. Several of them were being held in reserve, not even firing their cannons, while only a few were more than successful in nearly destroying the fortress on the coastline and leveling the homes along the seashore. You have my word, he assured. Virginia looked at him regrettably. Fine. Where are we dining? Follow me, my dear, he said. Virginia followed Narumel as he led her to a door that ran between both staircases of the helm. 2 guards posted outside opened the doors as she and Narumel walked through. Inside was a banquet table with 4 seats prepared, with one woman seated at the middle section looking hauntingly into Virginia's eyes as she entered the room. Virginia gasped and immediately drew her sword, pointing at the woman. Instantly, Aurora flooded the room with her light. You! Exclaimed Virginia. The chair flew behind her as the woman shot out of her seat and held out her palm at Virginia. A smoky red fire burned upon her hand. Virginia felt an arm wrap around her neck from behind, while another grabbed her arm that held Aurora and pulled it off to the side, pointing the sword away from the woman. Everyone, stop this instant, shouted Narumel, holding his hands up. Darkcry, let her go right now. Virginia could feel Darkcry's breath hitting the back of her neck as he held on tightly. I said let her go, ordered Narumel. Darkcry released her. Virginia jumped away from him, pointing her sword back and forth between Darkcry and the woman. Happy to see me again? Asked the woman cunningly. Narumel stood between both the Indian and the woman. I take it that you have met Princess Alaythia. Virginia pointed her sword at Alaythia. Met her. Last time I saw her, she held up her hand, just like that, and released a blast of fire that nearly killed me. Yes, I'm very well acquainted with Her Royal Highness. Alaythia, said Narumel. As you can see, our guest is quite terrified of you. Would you kindly lower your hand? Virginia watched and waited for Alaythia to move. For a few seconds, which felt like hours, she did nothing but stare at Virginia. But then, without breaking her gaze, she lowered her arm, and the fires engulfing her hand died away. There you go, Virginia, said Narumel. She means you no harm. Now, if you kindly sheath your sword, that would be greatly appreciated to make us feel better. Virginia looked at all 3 of them. No one is going to hurt you, Virginia, said Narumel. You have my word, remember? Taking a deep, regretful breath, Virginia sheathed Aurora. The light faded from the room, and the shadows fell back into their corners. Narumel pulled out the chair at the end of the table. Come, my dear, please take a seat. Virginia walked over to the chair, never taking her eyes off Alaythia. She sat down as Narumel pushed the chair close to the table. Darkcry sat next to her, across from Alaythia. Narumel took his seat at the head of the table. There, he said, smiling and placing his hands on the table. Now, isn't this nice? She heard a man in the corner of the room snap his fingers, and a door opened behind her. Out came several cooks carrying silver dishes upon their shoulders. One placed a large plate, holding a stuffed pig in the center of a table. Another poured wine in the glass of each of their cups, while others brought bread and fruit. As soon as they finished placing the food out, they all disappeared behind Virginia, while one remained present to prepare the plates for each one at the table. Virginia was served first with a slice of pork, a vine of grapes, and a portion of bread. Please eat, said Narumel. No call for too much propriety here. No need to wait for us before you dig in. Virginia looked down in sickness at the food before her. Are you not hungry? Asked Narumel. Actually, said Virginia, pushing the plate away from her, would it surprise you that I am just too anxious to eat? Narumel smiled empathetically. Then we shall proceed with our conversation. Yes, please, she said. Very well. Virginia, allow me to extend my apologies for how you have been treated on behalf of the law of the people. Our next generation of leaders over Alaythia have been remiss and perceived you to be the danger of our kingdom. The Princess Alaythia of Skal Galmudaretz and Darkcry, Prince of the tribe of Bloodstar, saw you as a threat to their rule by encouraging rebellion. I've done everything to assure them that this is not the case. To make things as assuring as possible, I instantly set out to help Candor the situation. What situation are we talking about exactly? Asked Virginia. Well, my dear, for over a century now, Skal Galmudaretz has desired to establish order amongst the kingdoms of Alaythia. But unfortunately, these rebels that you have been taking shelter with for the past week or so have been the disruption of that perfect order. So what you are telling me is that you think Skal Galmudaretz is the real kingdom of Alaythia? Asked Virginia. Think? My dear, Skal Galmudaretz is the kingdom of Alaythia. Then what have you to say about Burning Eagle, Rose Cohen, or the waters of Alaythia? Oh, yes, of course, said Narumel, shaking his head sympathetically and sipping his wine. They would indoctrinate that into your head first now, wouldn't they? Indoctrinate? What do you mean? Narumel placed his glass down on the table. My dear, innocent Virginia, I hate to be the one to bring this bit of news to you, but you must know the truth. Skal Galmudaretz is the chosen kingdom of Alaythia, and these people, these rebels that you have been taking shelter with, well, I hate to say it, but they are the outlaws of the land. Outlaws? Yes, my dear. And just what does that make you, exactly? I'm the architect of Skal Galmudaretz. I'm the one who designs the landscape development of every building, statue, and castle, brick by brick. I am the one who paves the way for peace in this land by making all equal. And the waters of Alaythia, is it true what you did to them? And what exactly is it that you've heard that I've done to them? I heard that you have trapped them behind a large fortress where their offspring still remain as prisoners to this day. That is true in part, my dear. Oh, yeah? How is that partially true? Virginia, let's be civil. Imagine that you were the sheriff of a town, and there was someone in the town who tried to lead the people in a rebellion against their rulers and the law of the land. Would you not do anything it took to stop this rebellion? Sure, I guess. Well, I would agree with you. And to my own regret, I had to stop the kingdom of Amya from rising up against me. See, I am the sheriff of this part of Alaythia, and the kingdom of Amya have been the people who rose against me in the past and continue to do so today. As punishment for their transgressions, he paused and stared into space while he constructed the words. I guess you could say I have locked them away in jail until they have repented of their rebellion. And what happens when they repent? They are free to go. I have no desire to hold them forever. Is that so? Certainly. Narumel snapped his fingers. A shadow walked out of the corner of the room behind him and stood at his side. Virginia saw a guy about her age wearing tan leather garments and an olive green cloak like hers with its hood drawn over his head. This gentleman right here, Narumel said, pointing to the man. This is my most loyal servant. He was once a prisoner behind my walls until he approached me in repentance, ate my food and drank my wine, symbolizing his remorse and receiving my laws rather than the laws of the rebellion that caused his ancestors to remain behind my fortress. He was so thankful for his freedom that he requested to serve me in all my comings and goings. Quite honorably, I gave him this position. He carries my authority with him wherever he goes. He looked at him and brushed his hand in the air. You may return. The servant moved backward, returning to the dark corner where he'd been hiding. My dear Virginia, continued Narumel, I hold nothing personal against the kingdom of Amya, but I will not tolerate a rebellion to my rule. If they wish to be prisoners behind my walls instead of loyal subjects before my throne, that is their choice. I have no desire to harm my loyal subjects. Then what do you call raiding the city tonight? Challenged Virginia. Well, I would call it a suppression, Virginia. Like I said, these people are rebels against my throne and my rule of this region, and recently they have become more aggressive. In fact, the rebellion has begun to spread throughout the whole southern woods of Earthstars, and has even made its way into the northern woods. Whispers of this continue to spread into other nations and kingdoms, more than I would care to entertain. It must be stopped. You must understand this. You must help me suppress this unnecessary rebellion, Virginia. And just how am I supposed to help you? And what's more, why should I help you? It's amazing how things work, Virginia. I was once in this same situation of trying to silence a very similar outcry against me. The people of Oralmuti all believe that you are the one who will lead them into battle and victory against me because they believe that you are Cohen. Is this true? Have they spoken this to you? Virginia waited for a moment before answering. Why do you ask? Narumel smiled sympathetically. They have said this, haven't they? Oh, my dear, I am sorry. I can't imagine the unfair pressure this has been on your shoulders. You still haven't answered my question. Why do you ask? Because, my darling, you can be the one to stop it all. They will stop fighting if you are not here. What are you proposing? My dear, I am asking you to leave Alaythia and live with your Aunt Elizabeth. Spare yourself the pressure that these poor savage people are trying to place upon you. With all due respect, my dear, you are not a warrior. How will you lead this rabbling bunch into war? And what's more, why would you want to fight against me? All that I have done has been to help you, my darling. I want this pressure to leave you. Why should I have to leave? Like I said, my dear, I do not want to hurt these people, but with you around, the rebellion grows stronger and stronger each day. It forces my hand, Virginia. It forces my hand to do something I'm afraid I will have no choice but to do. Virginia turned her head slightly, studying him carefully. What are you saying? Narumel rose from his chair and walked over to the room's large bay window. Come, my darling, stand beside me. Virginia rose from her seat, walked over to Narumel, and stood beside him.
Hey everyone, we'll get right back to the episode in just a minute, but first, I wanted to talk to you about early access. You may have noticed those chapters with the locks beside them in your episode feed. Those episodes are the ones available for our early access members. While every episode is released on Thursdays with ads, early access members can enjoy the episodes on Sunday ad-free, ahead of everybody else, for only $5 a month. Not only this, but your $5 contribution to the show helps with supporting the channel and the podcast creation of book number 2. Click the link in the show notes below and join early access benefits while also supporting the channel. And now, back to the episode.
Look out there, Virginia, he said. Look out at the city. What do you see? Virginia looked at the city of Gaal. The fortresses and houses she had seen earlier, taking cannon fire at the ocean's edge, were rising with flames so overwhelming that they illuminated the clouds in the sky. Above the city was an untold horde of black-winged creatures waging war in the heavens against the brightly shining warriors who flew with the wings of light. She could hear this oppressive, unrelenting cannon fire continuing to level the city, creating a beachhead along the coastline homes. Thousands of cries of help from the city's citizens, hundreds of battle cries from the warriors, and innumerable shrieks from the devils in the sky echoed as overwhelmingly as the fire that torched the city. Do you see it, Virginia? Asked Narumel. Do you see what happens when my subjects rebel against me? Virginia's eyes began to water. Her lips tightened as she tried to hold back the swelling anger and remorse surfacing on her face. I'm sorry to say it, Virginia, but you are the cause of all of this, said Narumel. But you are also the one who can make it all go away. She tried to speak without her sorrow choking her words. By leaving Alaythia? No, said Narumel. By leaving Alaythia and moving overseas to live with your aunt. She turned to look at him. Why can't I just stay in Mason County back home? Why does it matter to you where I live on Earth? The fires of the city splashed waves of a hellish red glow against his face. It has nothing to do with that, Virginia. I couldn't care less where you live. But since it is also the local residence of one important warrior of Oralmuti, one of whom people believe is the other side of this so-called prophecy, I'm afraid that living in Mason County would only keep the fires of the rebellion alive. Hope would continue to exist in their hearts, and I'm afraid that alone might be enough for them to rise in defiance against me. She felt the life retreat from her body while her eyes focused on his words. I'll have to leave him? Narumel turned his face and looked down at her. Depends on how badly you wish to keep him alive. You've seen the battle. Anything can happen out there. Amidst her rising anguish, she watched carefully as his curtain of charm began to partially draw back, revealing a shadow of malice staged behind his eyes. But what if I told them not to fight? She inquired. What if I just lived in Mason County, but refused to return to Alaythia? Narumel turned his face. Look out the window again, Virginia. Do you see what rebellion can cause? Their stubbornness is unrelenting. As long as you are close, hope will continue to fan the flames of their stubbornness, which only forces me to act. He held his hand out to the battle scene, leading inevitably to this. I wouldn't want them to risk that. Would you, Virginia? She watched as the flames began to spread further into the city. Why should I trust you? Narumel snapped his fingers. Walking up beside him was his servant, holding out a dagger with a black finished blade for him to take. Narumel took it and held it out for Virginia to see. Like I said, Virginia, I hope that you realize just how much more of a gentleman I am than these people give me credit for. With that comes my solemn word. I will not destroy this city or the people within its borders if you keep your word and leave Alaythia and Mason County. If I fail to keep my end of the bargain, then as punishment, this dagger will be plunged into my heart. Virginia looked over her shoulder at Darkrai and Alaythia. What about them? Of course. Alaythia, Darkrai, if you both would please come over here. Alaythia and Darkrai rose from their seats and walked over to Virginia and Narumel. Virginia, said Narumel, these two standing before you are the prince and princess of the lands that stand close to mine. Altogether, our 3 territories cover this portion of the land of Alaythia. He looked at Darkrai and Alaythia. My lords, do you join me in saying that if Virginia leaves Alaythia and Mason County and promises never to return, no harm from any of us shall fall upon her or this city? You have my word, said Darkrai. You have mine as well, said Alaythia. You see, Virginia, assured Narumel, we all can be civil. As long as you promise to leave and never return to Mason County or Alaythia, then we will never harm you. And if we do seek to harm you while you are holding your end of the bargain, then the one who breaks the agreement will have this dagger thrust through their heart. This agreement will be announced throughout all the lands, and anyone who finds us acting in treachery to this agreement will have all rights to administer the penalty. Does this sound convincing enough to you? Virginia looked at them, tears beginning to redden her eyes. I guess so. Good, said Narumel. Now, there is but one final agreement that must be made. If you break your side of the agreement, then the loyal subjects of Alaythia will have the right to administer the same penalty against you as well. She looked at Narumel with concerned eyes. He waved his hand in the air. Oh, don't let that scare you, Virginia. This is here to protect you. This also goes for anyone within our regions whom we oversee for the kingdom of Skal Galmudaretz. With all of this said, can you agree to this? Virginia looked all of them in the eyes again. Her lips trembled. And you will stop attacking the people? As soon as you sign the parchment of this agreement, I will not tarry 1 second longer in calling all ships to a ceasefire, assured Narumel. Now, what say you? Virginia felt her body slowly grow numb. What parchment? Narumel snapped his fingers again. Instantly, the servant brought over a silver dish. Lying on top was a document, with a bottle of ink and a feather pen stationed beside it. This is the parchment of our agreement, Virginia, said Narumel. It covers everything that I just finished saying to you. Should you sign it, all we have discussed becomes official. Narumel took the feather pen and signed at the bottom of the page. There. Allow me to be the first. Alaythia took the feather pen from Narumel, dipped it in the ink bottle, and signed her name on the bottom. Darkrai took the pen, dipped it in the ink bottle, and signed his name. Then he held it out for Virginia to take. What say you, Virginia? Asked Narumel. Virginia looked at the pen as time slowed down before her. The glow of the city's fire behind her danced across its feather, and the faces of the ones surrounding her. The cries of help, shrieks, and thundering battle cries swelled in her ears. The baseline of cannon fire formed a secondary heartbeat inside her chest. She blinked her eyes, sending 2 tears running down her face. What should I do? Virginia, inquired Narumel. Virginia looked up into his eyes. If you want all of this to end and all of these people to live, then sign the parchment. Virginia drew 2 breaths before she realized she had taken the pen from Darkrai. What am I doing? The echoes of the screaming voices behind her grew louder and louder. Virginia dipped the pen in the ink bottle, placed it onto the parchment, and closed her eyes. The screams grew louder and louder and louder. Virginia found herself stroking the pen across the page. Narumel snapped his fingers. The servant raised his head to his master's gesture. "Tell the Armada to hold their fire for a momentary armistice while we return Virginia to shore," he said. She heard the servant walk off without saying a word. "Well, I will accept that, Virginia," said Narumel. "After all, they know you by both names in this land anyway." "Huh?" Virginia opened her eyes and saw the tip of the feather pen completing the name she had written for herself on the parchment. Cohen. "What?" she asked. I wrote that?" "Yes, you did, Virginia," said Narumel. "But it's the heart that matters, and your heart was in it." Narumel took the pen out of her hands. Putting it back in the ink bottle, he placed the silver dish with the parchment on the dining table. Virginia stared at the names written on the parchment, but stopped at her name in particular. "But I was writing my name. Why did I write—" "Listen to that, Virginia," said Narumel. Virginia listened closely. The sound of people crying out in pain was still there, but not as loud. The sound of shrieking monsters became silent. The battle cries and cannon fire dissolved and was heard no more. "Listen to that," he said. "Peace. Not division, not war. Peace. It's what happens when proper control is in order, Virginia." Virginia looked back at the parchment. "Why did I write—" "Come, Virginia," said Narumel. "Let's return you to shore." Virginia stood on the deck near the edge of the ship. Below her, a rowboat floated in the water with Darkrai and some of his warriors, Narumel's servant, and several other crew members. Virginia was about to climb over the edge when she heard Narumel's voice call out from behind her. "Virginia, the attack upon the city you witnessed tonight was just a drop in the bucket compared to what will pour out upon these people should you decide to return. This is just a reminder of our agreement. You know the consequences if you should return. But what is more, I hope you will realize that there is nowhere that you can hide from me. If you return, I will not only follow through with our contract agreement, but I will also kill all of those who participated in keeping you hidden from me. You have my word." Virginia bit her tongue and climbed over the ship's side, down the ladder and into the boat. As soon as she sat down at the stern of the rowboat, Narumel's servant rose to his feet, shouting orders and commanding the sailors aboard to start rowing. She wrapped her arms around her, feeling empty and dead inside, with no one to wrap their arms around her. As the men rowed the boat to the seashore, she turned around and gave one last look at the ship. Standing at the edge of the vessel was Narumel, looking down at her. He did not say anything, but his words were just as fresh inside the pit of her stomach. "You have my word, Virginia."
This is the end of Chapter 30. Tune in next Thursday for Chapter 31. If you'd like to listen to the next chapter ad-free ahead of everyone else, then subscribe to Early Access and tune in on Sunday. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe and share with your friends and family. It really helps the show. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all major podcasting platforms. What Shines with the Dawn was written and created by C. Taylor Eason. Copyright Christian Taylor Eason, 2024.